The fluorescent lights of the plant buzzed overhead, casting harsh shadows across the assembly line. Kendrick's hands moved automatically. Connect wire, secure bolt, check connection, push forward. 15 years on this line, and his body knew the motions without his mind being present. It wasn't present. It was back in that courtroom 2 months ago. In light of the defendant's lack of prior offenses, the court sentences Mr. Wilkins to 2 years imprisonment with possibility of parole after. The bolt slipped from Kendrick's fingers, clattering to the floor. The line kept moving. Henderson, you with us? Mike, the floor supervisor, was suddenly beside him. Yeah, sorry. Kendrick retrieved the bolt, his movements mechanical. 2 years. 2 years for taking his daughter Zara. 2 years for destroying everything. Third time this week, Mike said, lowering his voice. Look, man, I know what you're going through. Do you? Kendrick's voice came out sharper than intended. You know what it's like to bury your 8-year-old daughter because some college kid couldn't call an Uber? Mike stepped back. The union rep said, you're entitled to more time. I don't need time. I need. Kendrick stopped himself. What did he need? Revenge? Justice? His daughter back? I just need to work. The assembly line jerked forward, another car frame moving into position. Kendrick turned away from Mike's concerned face and back to the relentless motion of the plant. During break, Kendrick sat alone in the corner of the cafeteria, stirring a coffee he wouldn't drink. His phone showed 3 missed calls from Shawnee's. He couldn't bring himself to return them. What would he say? That he was fine? That he'd be home for dinner? That he wasn't imagining tracking down Martin Wilkins after his inevitable early release? You should call her back. Kendrick looked up to see Darnell, his line partner for 15 years, sliding into the seat across from him. She's worried, man. Jaden, too. I know. Kendrick pushed the coffee away. I just can't right now. You still going to those meetings with Pastor Williams? Kendrick shook his head. What's the point? Praying didn't save Zara. Maybe it's not about. Don't. Kendrick held up his hand. Just don't, all right? Everyone's got advice. Everyone's got some Bible verse that's supposed to make this better. Darnell was quiet for a moment. You remember when my Keisha was sick? You drove us to every chemo appointment. You prayed over her every single time. And she got better, Kendrick said, the bitterness in his voice surprising even himself. God answered those prayers, not mine. Kendrick. The brake buzzer sounded. Kendrick stood up, grateful for the interruption. Gotta get back. By shift end, the winter darkness had already fallen. Kendrick trudged across the employee parking lot, the Detroit wind cutting through his jacket. His breath formed clouds in the frigid air as his mind circled the same thoughts it had for months. Zara's empty bedroom, Shawnee's crying when she thought he couldn't hear, Jaden asking when his dad was going to laugh again. His phone vibrated. Shawnee's. Kendrick, hey, Shawnee's, you coming home? The question carried weight beyond the simple words. Was he coming home, really home, not just physically present in the house while his mind stayed locked in grief and rage? Yeah, he said, unlocking his car door, just leaving now. Jaden has his science project. He needs help. I'll help him, Kendrick promised, knowing he'd sit there staring at it, useless. And Kendrick, her voice softened. Pastor Williams called again. He says the men's group misses you. Kendrick closed his eyes, leaning against the cold car door. I used to be the strong one, Shawnee's. Everyone came to me with their problems. Now I can't even. His voice broke. I don't know how to do this. You don't have to be strong. You just have to come home. As he hung up, Kendrick noticed his hands were shaking. He used to pray before driving home each day, a little ritual of gratitude. Now prayer felt like screaming into an empty sky. He started the engine, the familiar rumble, doing nothing to drown out the howling emptiness inside him. 2 years, 2 years for his daughter's life, and Kendrick didn't know if he could survive even one more day of this darkness. The assembly line roared like it always did, metal parts clanging, pneumatic hisses, foremen shouting over the din. Kendrick mechanically attached the same component he'd attached 10,000 times before, his mind 1,000 miles away, or more accurately, 8 blocks away at Redemption House, where his daughter's killer was serving the remainder of his joke of a sentence. Kendrick. He didn't look up, didn't want to talk to anyone. Kendrick, a hand touched his shoulder. He turned, ready to snap, and found himself face to face with Henry, the new guy on second shift. Dark skin, salt and pepper beard, always smiling, always bringing homemade lunches that filled the break room with smells that made the vending machine food seem even more pathetic. What? Kendrick shouted over the noise. Wanted to see if you join me for lunch. He pointed at his watch. Breaks in 5. Kendrick shook his head. Not hungry. But 20 minutes later, he found himself sitting across from Henry in the corner of the break room. He hadn't meant to come. His feet just carried him here, away from the noise, away from his thoughts. My wife makes too much food, Henry said, sliding half a sandwich toward him. Says I'm too skinny. Kendrick stared at the offering. I said I'm not hungry. Your stomach's been growling so loud it's competing with the machinery. He smiled, no judgment in his eyes, just trying to be neighborly. Kendrick took the sandwich reluctantly. Thanks. They ate in silence for a few minutes. The sandwich was good. Turkey, avocado, something else he couldn't place. First thing he tasted in months. You been here long? Henry asked. 17 years. He whistled. That's commitment. That's a mortgage and 2 kids. Kendrick immediately regretted his words. 2 kids. Not anymore. Henry nodded like he understood everything Kendrick wasn't saying. I got 3 myself, teenagers now, Lord help me. Kendrick waited for the usual questions, the pitying looks, the awkward condolences once they realized who he was, but Henry just unwrapped a cookie and broke it in half, offering him a piece. I lost my brother, he said casually, like he was discussing the weather. 15 years ago, shot during a convenience store robbery. Kendrick froze mid-bite. Why are you telling me this? Because for 3 years after, I planned exactly how I'd kill the man who did it. He met Kendrick's eyes, had it all worked out, knew his routines, where he lived, even bought the gun. Kendrick's heart pounded. How did he know? Who had been watching him? I'm not saying I know what you're going through, Henry continued. Everyone's valley is different, but I recognize the look of a man walking through his own. Did you do it? The question came out before Kendrick could stop it. Henry shook his head. My pastor found me sitting outside the guy's apartment, just like yours found you last night. Kendrick stared at him, stunned. How? Pastor Williams called me this morning. We go way back, asked me to keep an eye out for you. Henry's voice lowered, said he found you parked outside Redemption House. Kendrick stood up abruptly, knocking his chair backward. You don't know anything about me. I know you're hurting worse than any man should have to hurt, Henry said, not rising. I know you're hearing a lot of voices right now. Anger, revenge, despair. They're loud, aren't they? Kendrick wanted to walk away, but something in Henry's voice, something different from all the counselors, the well-wishers, the platitudes held him there. There's another voice, Henry said softly, quieter than the others, but it's the only one that leads somewhere besides more pain. Save the sermon, Kendrick muttered. Henry nodded, gathering his lunch containers. Fair enough. But if you ever want to talk to someone who's been where you are, he slid a card across the table. My number's on there. The break bell rang. As Kendrick turned to leave, Henry called after him. Kendrick, his rod and his staff, they're not just pretty words in a poem, they're real, and man do they ever comfort when the wolves are circling. Kendrick walked back to his station, the card burning a hole in his pocket. The following week, Kendrick couldn't feel his hands anymore. They'd gone numb from gripping the gun for so long. Henry sat across from him in his living room, just waiting. The clock on the wall read 3:17 a.m. He hadn't moved for almost 2 hours. You know I'm not leaving, right? Henry's voice was gentle but firm. Not until you give me that gun. Then we'll be sitting here a long time. Kendrick's voice sounded hollow, even to himself. I've got nowhere to be, Henry replied. Your family needs you, not revenge, you. Kendrick glanced down the hallway where Shanice and Jaden were sleeping. They need justice. That's what they need. And you think this is it? Henry gestured toward the gun. 2 years wasn't enough for that drunk driver, so you're gonna what? Get yourself life in prison? Leave your wife to raise Jaden alone? The mention of my son hit Kendrick like a physical blow. You don't understand, he whispered, his voice cracking. I was supposed to protect them, all of them. You can't always. Don't. Kendrick cut him off. Just don't say it. Henry went quiet again, then surprised him. You remember that time Pastor Williams took the men's group camping? He said you found that sheep stuck on its back? Kendrick blinked at the sudden change. What? That sheep. Remember, it had rolled over into that ditch and couldn't get up, legs kicking in the air. Yeah, so the farmer told us they call that a cast sheep. Said once they're on their back, they can't get up without help. The gases build up and eventually they die there unless someone finds them. Kendrick stared at him. What's your point? You're like that cast sheep right now, Kendrick. Stuck on your back, kicking at the air, getting weaker by the hour. And no matter how hard you try, you can't right yourself. Something broke inside Kendrick then. His hands started shaking, and the gun suddenly felt impossibly heavy. I don't know how to get up, he admitted, his voice barely audible. Henry nodded slowly. That's why the Good Shepherd carries a staff, to lift the sheep that can't get up on their own. Tears blurred Kendrick's vision as he finally set the gun on the coffee table between them. Henry quickly took it and emptied the chamber, pocketing the bullets. I was praying every day, Kendrick said, the words tumbling out, every single day, and he still let my baby die. Where was the protection then? Where was the shepherd when the wolf came? Henry moved to sit beside him. He was there, Kendrick, right there in that valley with you. Then why didn't he stop it? I don't know, Henry said. His honesty surprised Kendrick, and he stared at him, saw the compassion and certainty. But I do know he's trying to carry you through it now, if you'll let him. Henry continued. Kendrick buried his face in his hands. I can't do this anymore. I can't. You don't have to do it alone. Henry put his hand on Kendrick's shoulder. Would you pray with me? Right now? Kendrick hesitated, then nodded. God, Henry began softly. Kendrick is in the darkest valley right now. He can't see the way forward. He can't get up on his own. Use your rod to protect him from his own thoughts. Use your staff to guide him back to the path. As he prayed, Kendrick felt Shawnice's presence. She had appeared in the doorway, tears streaming down her face. She crossed the room and knelt beside him, taking his hand in hers. For the first time since they buried their child, they prayed together. It wasn't a dramatic healing. The pain didn't magically disappear, but something shifted that night, like being slowly turned right side up after weeks of suffocating upside down. The Good Shepherd had found Kendrick in the valley, and somehow he knew he wouldn't leave him there. Kendrick sat alone on their front porch, staring at nothing. Shawnice had taken Jaden to his basketball practice, the first time their son had agreed to go since Zara's death. The evening air held that particular Detroit summer warmth, heavy but not yet oppressive. His Bible lay unopened beside him. Pastor Williams had dropped it off last week after Kendrick had missed church for the 12th Sunday straight. You still in there, Kendrick? He'd ask, pressing it into Kendrick's hands. Kendrick picked it up now, letting it fall open where a bookmark had been placed. Psalm 23, of course, your rod and your staff, they comfort me. The sound of a car pulling up made him look up. Henry stepped out, carrying what looked like a casserole dish. Didn't call first, he said, climbing the steps. Figured you'd just say not to come. Before Kendrick could tell him to go away, a car pulled up to the curb. A woman Kendrick didn't recognize stepped out, hesitating at the bottom of the porch steps. Can we help you? Henry asked. Stand. The woman twisted her hands together. I'm looking for Kendrick Henderson. Kendrick's body tensed. That's me. Her eyes, red-rimmed and shadowed, Met his, my name is Lisa Wilkins. I'm Martin's sister. The world seemed to tilt. Martin Wilkins, the man who killed Zara. Henry placed a steady hand on Kendrick's shoulder as he started to rise. Maybe this isn't the best time. No, Kendrick said, surprising himself. It's okay. Lisa climbed the steps slowly, like each one required immense effort. I've driven by your house a dozen times, could never make myself stop until today. Why now? Kendrick's voice came out harder than he intended. Because I finally got him to write this. She held out an envelope, her hand trembling. He wouldn't. After the trial, he just shut down, wouldn't talk about what happened. But last week, something changed. Kendrick stared at the envelope without taking it. What do you want from me? Nothing, she whispered. I just thought you should know the whole story about that night, about why he was drinking that day. I don't need excuses, Kendrick said, but didn't rise to leave. Lisa's eyes filled with tears. That morning, Martin found out his 6-year-old son had leukemia. Because of other health factors, the doctors gave him weeks, maybe months to live. Her voice broke. Martin had been sober 5 years since rehab. That diagnosis broke something in him. Kendrick felt the air leave his lungs. We didn't know about Tyler. Martin and Tyler's mother, they weren't on the best of terms. By the time she told Martin Tyler was dying, there wasn't much time left. He went to the bar to escape, just for a few hours. He wasn't thinking straight. Lisa looked down at her hands. It doesn't justify what he did. Nothing could, but he wasn't some college kid who didn't care. He was a father whose world had just collapsed. Henry shifted uncomfortably beside Kendrick. His son Tyler, Lisa continued after inhaling deeply, he passed away last week. That's why Martin finally wrote this, said he couldn't face God with this still on his conscience. She placed the envelope on the small table between them. I understand if you never open it. I understand if you hate him forever. But I wanted you to know that every day he spends in that cell, he's thinking about your daughter, about what he took from you. Kendrick stared at the envelope, feeling the neat corners of his rage beginning to blur. Does he know you're here? Lisa shook her head, no, and he'd probably be furious if he knew. But I've lost my nephew, and I've essentially lost my brother too. I just couldn't bear all this waste, all these lives destroyed. Silence fell over the porch. The evening insects had begun their chorus, filling the space between the three of them. Kendrick stared at the envelope, his mind racing, a father who lost his child, just like him. I should go, Lisa said quietly, starting to rise. I'm sorry to have disturbed you. Wait. The word escaped Kendrick's lips before he could stop it. He picked up the envelope, turning it over in his hands. You said he found out that morning, the same day? Lisa nodded. He'd been at the hospital all day. The doctors kept running tests, kept giving them worse news. By evening, he just broke. Kendrick thought about the courtroom, about the hollow-eyed man who'd stood there, who'd pleaded guilty immediately, who'd never once tried to defend himself. At the time, Kendrick had taken it as indifference. Your brother, Kendrick said slowly, he didn't mention any of this at the trial. No, Lisa agreed. He didn't want it to seem like an excuse. He told his lawyer not to bring it up, said he deserved whatever punishment came. Henry's hand was still on Kendrick's shoulder, steady and grounding. Kendrick could feel something shifting inside him. Not forgiveness exactly, but something just as powerful. Recognition. The recognition of another father's pain. I'm sorry about Tyler, Kendrick said, his voice rough. Lisa's eyes widened slightly. Thank you. She stood to leave, the weight of the moment visible in her posture. Would you like some water before you go? Henry asked unexpectedly. Lisa hesitated, then nodded. That would be nice, thank you. As Henry went inside, she and Kendrick were left alone on the porch, the space between them filled with shared grief. How old is your son? Lisa asked softly. Jaden's 12, Kendrick replied. He's having a hard time. I'm sure, Lisa said. Kendrick turned the envelope over again, then finally tore it open. The letter inside was written in uneven handwriting, the paper warped in places where tears had fallen. I don't know if I can read this right now, he admitted. You don't have to, Lisa said. Maybe when you're ready. Kendrick folded the letter and slipped it into his pocket just as Henry returned with a glass of water. Thank you, Lisa said, taking the glass. I should get going. Martin gets one phone call a week, and he's supposed to call tonight. As she turned to leave, Kendrick found himself speaking words he never thought he'd say. Would you tell him? He began, then stopped, unsure what message he wanted to send to the man who had taken his daughter's life. Would you tell him I'm sorry about Tyler? He finally said, and that I'll read his letter. Lisa's face showed surprise, then gratitude. I will. After she left, Henry sat back down beside Kendrick, not speaking, just being present. The sun was beginning to set, casting long shadows across the yard. You didn't have to do that, Henry said at last. I know, Kendrick replied, his hand pressing against the letter in his pocket. So why did you? Kendrick thought for a long moment and said, because the valley's dark enough without us making it darker for each other. That night, Kendrick sat at the kitchen table, Martin's letter unfolded before him. Shawnee stood behind him, her hands resting gently on his shoulders. Are you going to read it? She asked. I think I do, Kendrick replied. Together, they read Martin's confession, his anguish, his plea, not for forgiveness, but for understanding. He wrote about his son Tyler, about his own failings as a father, about the moment he realized he'd taken someone else's child while trying to escape the pain of losing his own. When they finished, Shawnice wiped tears from her face. What are you thinking? I'm thinking about what Pastor Williams said at Zara's funeral, Kendrick answered, about how hatred is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. Shawnee squeezed his shoulders. For months, I've been praying to stop hating him. I didn't know I should have been praying to see him. To see him as a person, not just the monster who took our daughter, Kendrick nodded. Can you forgive him? Shawnice asked. Kendrick placed his hand over hers. I don't know, but for the first time, I want to try. 9 months after Zara's death, Kendrick stood before the men's group in the church basement, his voice steady as he addressed them. When my daughter was killed, Kendrick began, I wanted to murder the man who did it. I planned it, had it all worked out. He paused, remembering the darkness that had consumed him, but something happened that I still can't fully explain. Henry sat nearby, nodding in encouragement. I felt this presence, Kendrick continued, like someone standing between me and destruction, not stopping me exactly, but protecting me from myself. You saying God stopped you? One of the men asked. I'm saying Jesus, the Good Shepherd, used his rod and staff not to beat me into submission, but to guide me away from the cliff I was heading toward. Kendrick's fingers traced the outline of the small wooden cross in his pocket, his constant reminder. I still wanted justice, still do, but vengeance would have destroyed what was left of my family. He took a deep breath. Last month, I did something I never thought possible. I visited Martin Wilkins at Redemption House. A murmur went through the group. I didn't go to forgive him, I went to see him, to look in the eyes of the man who took my daughter. What I found was another father drowning in grief and guilt. Kendrick looked around the circle of men. I can't say I've forgiven him completely. That's a journey, not a destination, but I can say that the valley doesn't seem quite as dark anymore. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small wooden cross. My son Jaden makes these now, says it helps him remember his sister. Kendrick extended it toward the newest member of the group, a man whose eyes reflected fresh grief. The valley's dark, brother, but the shepherd's rod and staff, they're there to guide and protect, not to beat you down. I'm still learning to trust that. Outside, rain began to fall, drumming softly against the windows of the church basement, like tears finally finding release.